The book How Civil Wars Start and How to Stop Them by Barbara F. Walter is crucial to understanding the rising political tensions in America and the UK and where it could lead. Walter is an American political scientist who has condensed her career's research into this eminently readable but deeply disquieting book. The first thing to understand about modern civil wars is that they are fought like guerrilla insurgencies rather than two standing armies facing off on a battlefield. The CIA investigated the features which sparked civil war in 1994. They identified two key ingredients for civil conflict. The first is the concept of anocracy. The polity scale ranks nations on a spectrum from being pure democracies to purely authoritarian. Nations at either end of these two extremes are unlikely to descend into civil war. However, life for the average citizen is generally better under a democracy. There's a grey zone in the middle, which is semi democratic, known as anocracy. These regimes give the pretense of democracy, but the political institutions are weak. This leads to opportunistic power struggles, and people have little faith that the government can provide them with a decent life. And countries are very vulnerable to civil conflict when they are either transitioning from dictatorship to democracy, as happened in Iraq and Syria, or when they go in the other direction. It's interesting to note that the US in recent years has slipped from being a firm democracy to anocracy under this classification. The second ingredient is factionalization, an extreme form of political polarization. People cluster around political parties who seek to rule to the benefit of one group to the exclusion of others. This may be down ethnic, religious, or other cultural lines. And it's rarely oppressed minorities that rise up first in armed conflict. She singles out a very specific narrative, the idea of sons of the soil, who usually push for armed conflict first. Sons of the soil are groups who consider themselves the natives of the land and feel their status or privilege is being eroded in favor of others, often minorities or immigrants. She gives the example of the majority Serbs before the Yugoslavian conflict. Again, she notes the rise of white rural Christian nationalism in the United States, people who feel their way of life is threatened and have strongly clustered towards the Republican Party. Once factionalization has occurred, the development of insurgent groups passes through predictable phases, accelerated by social media into all-out violence. And this occurs so fast that most ordinary citizens won't even realize the full extent of the danger until it is already upon them. I think this is one of the most important books of the decade, having been published in 2023. If you're at all politically engaged and concerned about the trajectory of political discourse in liberal democracies, this is a must-read book.